Hi, I'm Zinta Schmidtjens, and I'd like to welcome you to today's talk on WebGIS management and dashboards at the City of Seattle in Washington State. With me today are Susie Brunzel, who's the WebGIS program manager in the Seattle IT department, and Lucy Zhang, who serves several roles in the GIS operations team in Seattle IT. Lucy built the dashboards that we'll be showing today and is continuously improving them. And I'm Zinta with the GIS and CADD Programs and Initiatives team in Seattle IT. The City of Seattle has a long history of encouraging a self-service model for desktop GIS use across the city departments. And the IT GIS and CADD section maintains and promotes a central source for shared data on a shared platform that's accessible to all staff. The purpose of today's presentation is to describe how the self-service model is being expanded to include the use of WebGIS platforms and efforts to grow that use of WebGIS platforms in a sustainable way. So to that end, dashboards are an important tool to avoid chaos in this trek through what seems like the forest of entropy, where things left on their own may devolve into chaos. In today's presentation, we'll provide some context about the use of GIS at the City of Seattle. We'll show some dashboards about users and content. These help us to distribute the costs that the using departments incur, and it helps us to manage the platform and plan for growth. We'll also touch on some of the professional relationships in our community. At this point, these are primarily peer-to-peer support kinds of relationships, but we're looking to explore WebGIS platform collaboration in the future. So for context, let's take a look at the platforms and users at the city. First, here's a look at the users of classic GIS desktop software. Most people are using ArcMap, and there's an increasing footprint of ArcGIS Pro. Over the years, the city's built many productivity tools and utility data editing tools. And as in other large organizations, we have two paths forward as ArcMap will be deprecated. Some tools and workflows will be redeveloped in ArcGIS Pro, but some workflows may be offered as web apps, and GIS Pro likely won't be needed for all of the current map users. So the current state, though, is we have over 1,200 desktop GIS software users at the city. What are the WebGIS platforms for internal use and for external use? We have two portal for ArcGIS environments that are on isolated segmented networks in hardened environments in order to comply with regulations. The regulations we need to comply with are the CGIS and NERC, CGIS being Criminal Justice Information Services, and NERC being the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. So those are isolated. And then we have in the middle, the middle icon there represents our ArcGIS servers, the classic ArcGIS servers for applications that have integrations into business systems, work and asset management systems, permitting systems, that sort of thing. To the right of that, we're representing the Citywide Portal for ArcGIS, and that's for general internal use, including the self-service web mapping that we'd like to promote. Public facing, we have on the right ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Hub, and we opt to host our public facing data and applications in those platforms where the infrastructure can be more responsive to spikes in demand. So how many users do we have across these platforms? Here's a snapshot from the spring of 2021. And we have over 5,000 staff members who use web or mobile GIS at the city. Together with desktop users, this means that about 50 to 60% of city staff use some form of GIS applications in their day-to-day work. And then for a picture of external use, we can go to the next slide. And our external traffic is about 2 million views per year. These here are some metrics from some of the most popular externally facing maps and apps. All the participating departments, they're working hard to provide value to the public we serve, And the IT, GIS, and CADD section needs to make sure that the growth of users and content is well managed. You know, of course, each one of these graphs has its own story to tell. Um, some of these sites are stood up rather quickly in response to emerging needs, such as this restaurant finder app that went up in early 2020 when the pandemic started. Some apps are quiet for most of the year, but when a storm hits, then the sites need to be responsive. So how do we recover the costs associated with all of this? How do we do that equitably? Let's see here. We'll take a brief look at the cost allocation model that we have and the factors that feed into it. We'll see the gaps in the model and how going forward we'll be able to use the dashboards to get metrics on WebGIS use. So here's the cost allocation model that's currently under revision. At first glance, it's pretty overwhelming, but basically there are 5 factors going down the left side. There are 5 factors that determine each department's contribution to keeping the lights on. There's the geographic area that the department or utility serves. There's a measure of the department's footprint in the centrally managed geodatabase. There's a measure of servers, data integrations, and then lastly, we need to distribute the cost of our enterprise license agreement for GIS software. All these factors have measurable counts, but we haven't accounted for the use of our new WebGIS platforms. And Susie will be demoing the WebGIS dashboards that Lucy built and how we can use this data and also provide transparency to the departments and the utilities on what their users are doing. We have 2 main dashboards with many tiles and filters. One dashboard is primarily about users, and the second dashboard is primarily about content. And for historical data, we need to preserve we need to preserve the historical data so that we can show trends over time. And Lucy is preserving a daily snapshot of the data, writing it out to a database. So at this point, I'd like to hand it over to Susie to demo the dashboards.
Thank you, Zinta. The first dashboard I'd like to share is our WebGIS user report dashboard. This dashboard shows the number and value of user accounts for both the Citywide Portal and ArcGIS Online environments. Note that this isn't showing counts on the separate and isolated portals that Seattle City Light and the Seattle Police Department hosts. The dashboard includes several tiles. The top left shows growth over time. In Portal, ArcGIS Online, and then by departments for Portal and ArcGIS Online. The top right is a count of the number of user accounts in each department, color-coded by user type, user type like viewer, fieldworker, creator, and editor. The bottom left tile image helps us manage accounts by showing the accounts that have been inactive for over a year. The middle bottom shows value of the named user licenses based on the Washington State Esri master price list. And the bottom right shows the value of these licenses broken out by department and user type. We can use a filter to show the 3 departments with the largest amount of users, which are SDOT, Seattle Public Utilities, and Seattle Parks and Rec. As you can see in Portal, they have continuous growth in time. We can see number of users with SPU having the most and Parks having the least. But what's interesting is if we translate down to our Portal license cost, based on the cost of licenses that the departments have, in Portal, viewers have 0 cost to us, and you can see below that that translates to a lower overall cost. Whereas the Parks Department really utilizes their mobile applications and has a majority of users as field workers, which is a more expensive user type. and translates into the cost down below. Now take note of the scale. I'm going to move into ArcGIS Online. You can see user types by these departments change, with a majority of creators that share their content publicly. And so there's less of the viewer, field worker, and editor user types, and the costs change as well. One of the things that I want to show by removing the filters is that we can monitor usage of the lesser user departments and see what's really going on and tell that story as well. So if I eliminate our high use departments, the one that I want to highlight here is this blue line, which is our Office of Economic Development. They've recently had a spike in use. And when we saw this, we wanted to engage with them. And what we found out was they were really utilizing the WebGIS platform for the Survey 123 for their COVID small business grants. And we've been able to support them knowing what they've been doing on this platform. The second dashboard I want to share is the ArcGIS Online Credit Usage Dashboard. Anyone who has spent time trying to understand the nuances of ArcGIS Online credit costs can attest it's complex. This dashboard we've built allows us to visually understand the cost and better communicate to our users. Like the user report dashboard, we can filter the dashboard and graphs by owner, item type, access, or what we know as sharing, storage size, last modified, and department. Along the top, we have the current metrics along with an item list of items that meet the filter criteria. And then in this tab, we have a graph, and each pane gives us specific information. This one in particular shows item storage by year. Note the 2020 increases. This is due to our onboarding of 3D scene data. And then we have some decreases in 2021. And this was due to the migration of a lot of our internal content that was formerly on ArcGIS Online into Portal. The second pane shows total storage by type. And you can see the largest types are tile packages, scene packages, and map services. Note the amount of private content in purple that we are paying credits to store. This is something that we should really look into. The next tab, total storage by department, this is also broken out by item type. ITD, which is the IT department, and OPCD, the Office of Planning and Community Development, are the departments with the largest amount. This is not surprising, as ITD is where most of the GIS staff sit, and OPCD owns the 3D scene data. The next tab shows total storage distribution. This pie chart really illustrates the proportion of storage size by department. Take note of the distribution of OPCD in purple, IT, and SDOT. They're the three largest on this pie chart. The next tab is total storage credit distribution. In contrast, this pie chart displays credit distribution by department. Notice the change between the previous chart. And the last pane on here is a feature service credit distribution, which is strongly aligned with storage credit cost. We developed the WebGIS user report and ArcGIS credit usage tools to support the financial reporting requirements. However, as we have seen, they are useful beyond to understand the plan for growth of WebGIS for the City of Seattle. We currently have dashboards formatted similar to the WebGIS user report planned for groups and to provide additional information on content reporting. I'd be happy to share these as well as soon as they're completed. Now back to our PowerPoint. Our goal with the city's WebGIS program is to enable users to self-serve as much as possible, but still maintain useful and functioning environments. I'm sure I don't have to convince this audience how challenging that can be. So in the last few slides, I want to highlight a few other methods that we use to minimize the chaos. Some are requirements, some are strategies, that we've implemented to help manage our environments and include security, digital engagement and accessibility, housekeeping of users, housekeeping of content, and training. Next slide, please. The City of Seattle's WebGIS security requirements are guided by and align with the overall IT security requirements. Any WebGIS environment with access outside the city firewalls must contain security compliance certificates or documentation from Esri. All WebGIS accounts must have a seattle.gov email account associated with them. WebGIS shared accounts, also known as built-in accounts, must only be used for administration. And these shared accounts cannot be used to log into mobile applications. And finally, no critical infrastructure data that should be used to cause harm to life or safety can be on any of these systems that are accessible to the outside. We are currently actively working with the IT security team on requested needs that aren't as clear-cut. These include collaboration with outside organizations, ArcGIS Hub implementation, and working with third parties such as volunteers, contractors, and consultants. And as noted earlier, the CGIS and NERC regulated requirements have led to separate portals for SPD and Seattle City Light in hardened environments. Next slide, please. The City of Seattle also has a digital style guide that WebGIS aligns to that matches with its general website. A WebGIS chapter is currently under development to further promote a consistent user experience. If you could click next slide, Zinta, we will see that our web maps also trying to maintain the same look and feel as the city's website with the city logo and the same colors. Next slide. The city strives to provide accessible web content. We know maps challenge accessibility needs, and we are working to produce screen reader text-only options, as well as utilizing standard accessibility features in ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise. What you're seeing on the screen is the screen reader example we have for our storm response map. The next thing I want to talk about is the housekeeping of user accounts. For us, we tag our WebGIS accounts with the user department. We do this by using the Active Directory accounts from the city and the named user accounts in WebGIS. We've developed an in-house script to assign the Active Directory account assigned department to the named user account in WebGIS. We also recommend groups with a large membership be managed using Active Directory groups. We ask that the department take over the management of this group at the Active Directory level. And finally, we have established custom roles that are defined by permissions in WebGIS, but also responsibilities. These custom roles follow a principle of least privilege. In terms of housekeeping of content, we rely heavily on our custom department admin role to understand their designated department's users and contents. Our department admins are responsible to review content. They ensure that the appropriate platform is used based on internal use, whether there's a public-facing requirement or an uptime requirement. What is shared to the public, they ensure is authoritative, performant, and also well documented. They are responsible for creating groups to minimize duplication under different names and ensure that the groups are documented. In addition, we encourage collaboration between our portal and ArcGIS Online to minimize duplication, and also so that we don't have to maintain the same thing in two environments. Next slide, please. We are working on standing up a strong training program for all of our WebGIS users, and we're dividing that training into two components, what we call WebGIS Basics, which are topics that apply to all roles. We plan to record these trainings and make them required in order to obtain a WebGIS account. Some examples of these topics are ArcGIS Online versus Portal, documenting items, roles and permission, sharing security, privacy. The second piece of our training program will focus on role-based training, which are specific to the custom roles that we have. they will include a written user guide outlining responsibilities and training, and also be required for the level of account that you have. Next slide, please. Part of our success is the friendships that we have built, and we rely on often. We feel like there's open communication with many of our regional partners, and we use the phone a friend option quite a bit. We've participated in the local portal summit in January 2020 and are excited to repeat in 2022. Thank you, WGGL. We have regular conversations with our neighbors, including King County, Snohomish County, City of Bellevue, City of Bellingham, and the City of Kirkland. And we are happy when we get vendor introductions to similarly sized organizations. That said, we're hoping to make new friendships here at this conference today. Next slide, please. We want to thank our contributors from the Seattle GIS CADD section. They include Ian Mosier, Josh Jones, Brian Rossetti, Nathan Hildebrandt, Chad Phelan, Yarek Demonsky, John Edwards, Harvey Arnone, and Steve Feinborn. And we've also included this document below that has helped us in architecting our environments. Next slide. Here are the contacts of myself, Zinta, and Lucy. Should anyone have any questions about this presentation, please feel free to reach out. Next slide, please. Any questions from you?
Thank you for joining our presentation.